We're going to talk about taking my personal portfolio site from WordPress to Hugo. We're going to talk about what all those are, why I did this, the history of where I'm going with this, and then a demo of my current live site, which is written in Hugo and it's live. You can view it at thecodeboss.dev, and we'll show the live running of it here. So from WordPress to Hugo. And also at the very end, maybe, we'll talk about this awesome slide presentation tool that you can get started on today called Simple Slides. All right, self-pitch over there. I'm the Code Boss. That's my portfolio site. I'm the Code Boss on a lot of different handles. So that's the biggest one is Techlahoma Slack, so you can find me there. Ping me for anything that you need or that I can help with. I work at a company called Clever. That's where we're at right now. Again, we do software consulting. I did a little pitch for them at the beginning of the talk. But we work with a lot of national clients, local clients. We do web development, mobile development. It's a lot of fun. I also co-organize OKC Web Devs, which is it is a Techlahoma sponsored user group. We meet here at Clever usually. We also have socials. We just had one last Friday at just various places in Oklahoma City. And it's fun. We kind of like to be a catch-all group for general development in Oklahoma City. It doesn't have to be web dev, but that's in our name. Back to the talk here. So from WordPress to Hugo. So let's talk about my history with like why this even is important. Why does it matter that I went from WordPress to Hugo? So I started working doing some front-end development in 2014, that's kind of when I really started learning front-end development. So I worked at an ad agency at the time. jQuery was king, if that kind of helps paint the picture of like when 2014 was. SaaS was still new, if that like is kind of weird to think about. And build automation tools were not the norm. Like it was still pretty normal to just write raw CSS, raw JavaScript and everything. We use Grunt.js at the place I was at, which is actually pretty forward-thinking, and we're like way far down the line from that. We've got like Webpack. We'll talk about a new one that I'm using for my current site. But 2014, different era. Again, I worked at an ad agency. That's kind of where I got a lot of these skills. And we built sites with CMSs. This is you can kind of see this is where this is going for using WordPress. WordPress is a content management system. That's what CMS stands for, and it's a great tool for allowing people who are not tech-oriented to manage the content on their site. Obviously, a developer has to build the site still, but it's a great thing for an ad agency to give to users who are not tech-oriented. So we use CMSs like ModX, which is very not used as much. We use one called Krauss CMS, which I still like quite a bit. I have a site that is built on Krauss CMS, and it's probably one of my favorite true content management systems. And of course, we use the king, WordPress. And this is the biggest CMS ever. It's everyone's you've probably heard of it, and if you don't necessarily know what it is or how to use it, that's okay. There's tons of resources. But suffice it to say, it's just a content management system that's written in PHP, and I think I've heard a stat that says 20% of the web uses WordPress. So it really is a great tool. It's very large, but it's a great tool. So kind of going back to my history, so like I was building my personal portfolio site, and I put it on WordPress, and it's like, okay, where am I going to host this? I'm going to put it on like my $5 a month DigitalOcean VM, like my virtual machine. It's super cheap. It was great. It was awesome. This was super great for a very long time. Oh, thumbs up, kid says so too. Now let's fast forward a little bit to 2021. We're like 7 years down the road now. Things have changed since then. There we go. Things have changed. DevOps is a thing. Like we didn't really have DevOps back in 2014. Of course it existed, but not in like the same vein that it exists today, where it's just so ubiquitous. Containers are used all over the place. Again, remember, I'm on this $5 a month DigitalOcean droplet. That's what they call it. Their little server. I will say I did upgrade to $10 a month at some point, but still a single server, not on containers. And of course, we've all, containers are everywhere. That's like the buzzword of the last 5 years for anything DevOps related. So what's better? I wanted to change my site at this point. I wanted to change my hosting. I was a little bit worried that what if my server went down? I would lose everything. Maybe I took backups, maybe I didn't, but I was kind of fretting about just, I'm I'm a developer. Like I should improve how my site is hosted, and I really wanted to do that. So what's better than a $10 a month droplet, which is what DigitalOcean's offering is? Well, it's a $20 a month single node Kubernetes cluster. So we're kind of jumping a little bit forward here to more 2021 things. Kubernetes is a great DevOps tool that's written in Go. Very apropos to this group. And it's been around for quite a while. I think it was released 2013, maybe 2014 by Google. And so, but it really has gained popularity, I'd say, over the last 5-6 years or so. But you know, to do this on DigitalOcean, I did have to pay more. There's various reasons for that, but not really in scope of this talk. Which, let's just ignore the fact that I had the exact same resources that I did before, like same memory, same CPU, it was just one node, and now I'm paying twice as much. But benefit is now I'm using what's called IAC, or infrastructure as code. And I know we're not talking about WordPress and Hugo yet, but we're kind of setting the stage for why this is all important. So the benefit here, even though I'm paying more money, is I rebuilt my projects using Docker, hosted them on Kubernetes, so that when things go down, that's actually how they work. Kubernetes nodes have to reset, or they get updates and they go down, and you put them up on a new server. That's literally how they work. So at least I'm using this, even though I'm paying a little bit more. So, but I noticed that my personal site that's running on WordPress was using a lot of memory. And let's talk a little bit about that. So WordPress is a PHP content management system. So PHP uses a certain amount of memory to run. Of course, it depends on what your needs are there. But that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is typically you have a static web server involved in that too. That can be Apache is historically what WordPress would be with. Nginx is another web server that's, I'd say, much more common these days. But you need a web server of some sort. And those are very low memory typically. They're very like simple things, but it's still another piece of the puzzle you have to know. And really the last part is a database, which is kind of just a complexity that is annoying. A lot of applications use databases. Like if you have users logging in to do stuff, you're going to use a database. There's really, there's not ideal ways to get around that. So in WordPress, the goal is people log in, they manage content. So of course there's a database. So that's kind of all relates to the memory usage here. But it was getting really high, like 600 megabytes, which for a production app that's like serving a lot of people, that's fine. That's not a ton, but this is like my personal website that no one manages the content for. It's just me, and I just don't need that load. And the problem is that like when this thing takes up a lot of memory, then I have to buy more Kubernetes nodes, which brings that $20 up a month to more. So that's why this is becoming important. Is this is literally going to save me money if I can shrink this. Not tons, but $10 a month, something like that. So, and it was really a combination of the database, like it was there, it took up memory, and then PHP, WordPress has various plugins, they take up various portions of memory. The big one was, I used one that cached a lot of my site, and that takes up memory. It's great use for a tool, but it takes up memory. So I evaluated, I really kind of thought hard about like, my site was old, and like, again, I built it in 2014, right? Like, JavaScript was jQuery all over the place. Like the whole CSS was one SAS file that was like 2,000 lines long. This is when I was learning front-end development, right? So, and it's old. There's decisions that I made then that I wouldn't make now, and that's how we get better. So, that's how all software works. And then I'm a developer, and I'm the only one who's managing the content. So I don't need a CMS really. Like I would just code the content myself if I really needed to change it. And last thing is I'd love to get rid of that database because it just takes up a lot of memory, a lot of resources, and that's that. I'll mention the air conditioner just kicked on, so if that messes with audio, we can raise the temperature a little bit, but let us know and we can do that. So what if I could shrink down that 600 megabytes to something much smaller, like 2 megabytes? I know that sounds crazy, but you can do it. Like I mentioned, the WordPress site uses like a web server, PHP, and a database. Well, the web server serves up static files. What if my site was a static site, meaning no backend, like no WordPress, no database? Then it's literally serving up HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and images and things like that. And that takes like nothing, no processing power whatsoever. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. I'm a developer. I don't need a content management system. Databases are also kind of annoying because you can't version control them, at least you shouldn't, if you export. Anyway, a lot of no-nos with that. And again, like the content is my own content. Like I'm okay with it being in the code. And I kind of would prefer that because then I don't have to take database backups and all these other things that you'd normally have to deal with. So what if I could shrink this down? And that's where I'm going. What if we used a static site generator like Hugo? So that's their fun logo there. I've seen like 3 or 4 different logos for Hugo, but that's their current one on their site. But what is Hugo? Hugo is a static site generator that you write, you kind of develop for it like a content management system. You build what are called templates, and they're HTML templates, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you put your content in there, and you still write content like you would somewhat like a normal content management system, but with the way static site generators work, that content doesn't go into a database. It actually will generate HTML files and CSS, JavaScript files. It will generate the static files, and that's what a tool like Hugo will do. So I'm not generating them because that would be a pain. Imagine if I had 100 blog posts. I don't want to generate 100 HTML files. I would rather just write the content for those and have another tool generate all those files for me. And that's what a tool like Hugo will do. And we'll do a little demo of that. But let's go to the pros of Hugo, because there's a lot of other static site generators that I could have used. There's Gatsby.js is in Node. There's another one in Node called Astro, I think. Probably every language has a static site generator. There's one for PHP called Statamic. And why did I go with Hugo? So the benefits are Hugo's got a ridiculously fast build time. So whenever you're developing for your site, whether you're just changing your content or you're editing like the CSS JavaScript, with a static site generator, you're going to be rebuilding, like regenerating those static files all the time. That's typically how they work. And if you don't have a fast build time, that can be just a really big pain. And Hugo jumping into this last bullet point there. It's written in Go. Go ends up compiling down into machine code. It's kind of known for being just very fast, much faster than typical languages like Ruby, Python, PHP, JavaScript, etc. So there's a big benefit there. And I'm talking like the difference between like a 1-second build time and a 3-second build time is it's astronomical. Like because you're doing that hundreds of times, like when you're writing. So those kind of stuff matters. It stood their test of time. There are plenty of static site generators. A lot of them are newer than Hugo, which is completely fine. But Hugo's been around for over a decade now. Like in Prime, I mentioned Teklahoma's original site. One of their original sites was built on Hugo, and I think that was 2014. And I think Gatsby.js has been around for a while. WordPress has been around for way longer than any of them. But that's quite a while. It's built up a really great community. I was able to Google a lot of stuff. Their documentation is great. I didn't include this bullet point, but it's also not too big of a tool. It's actually, I was able to go through and do really everything that I needed to do. There were some really cool components of Hugo that I really liked. So during 2022, 2023, so really starting like late last year up to early this year, I really went through and rebuilt my entire site. Again, my site was old, built in 2014. I did not update some like concepts, but I did add code here and there. But it was always a pain. Like, it's like, great, here's Aaron from 5 years ago when he first learned how to do all this stuff, and now I'm stuck with his decisions. Well, it's always nice, and I truly did rebuild the entire site. I went like from scratch using Hugo, using Tailwind CSS, which is a very cool, pretty modern CSS tool where you don't write your CSS in your HTML with classes, but you use what are called utility classes. And at first I didn't like it, but this is my first project to use it on, and I really liked it. And you'll probably see some of that with this demo. Used a build automation tool called Rollup.js. There are a handful of those, but Rollup was fine. It's exactly what I needed. So I was using Grunt for the original site, which took a long time. Rollup is much faster. And if you have heard of a front-end build tool now called Vite, which is probably the newest one, I believe it's built off of Rollup anyway. So it's kind of nice to use something pretty modern. I use TypeScript. I've used TypeScript in the past, but this is my first project to set it up and use it, and that was awesome. It's a great feeling. Put linting and tests in this. So linting is what will analyze your code to make sure that you're following standards, whatever those standards that you've defined are, as well as making sure that you don't have typos, things. It's probably not going to catch like logic issues, but it'll catch a lot of things that will just handle code formatting. Tests. Didn't do tests for the Hugo side. Again, it's static content, so it's kind of up to me to determine what success would even mean then. But I built the whole theme myself, so we'll probably get into that too. But Hugo allows you to, just like WordPress, you can choose a theme for your site. Hugo lets you do that too, or you can build your own theme, and that's what I did as well. But if you're creating a site with Hugo today, you can just pick a theme and download it and put in your content. You don't have to design your own site if you don't want to. But I did, and I wrote tests for all that. And I did update my WordPress site to use Docker at some point, but this is a much simpler Docker file. I had 3 Docker files before, one for PHP, one for the database, one for Nginx, and now I just have one. It's a simple, anyone could deploy, theoretically anyone could like pull down my Docker image, deploy it, and you're running my site. And then the last thing, CI/CD is a continuous integration, continuous deployment. It will run all these tests, linting whenever I push up code, and it'll auto deploy when I tag new releases on GitHub. That's not really in the scope of worrying about Hugo, but it's all part of the site rebuild, and it just feels more modern. Like it feels like I'm kind of jumped from 2014 into 2023, and it's just a nice feeling. So I think from here we're going to a demo of my site, and we're going to, we can go to the codeboss.dev and view my site from here, and this is live and everything. This is the Hugo static site. But I want to show it instead by running it locally, which typically you go to a certain port. And Hugo runs on localhost 1313 by default. I'm sure you can change that. But it's not up right now. It'll probably just give me a 404. So I was just going to show what the actual process is to run a Hugo site. So this is the project. We're not going to go through the code quite yet. I want to show how my site is set up so that it'll make sense when we go through some of the code. But to run the project, it's just a simple command. You do have to have the Hugo command installed, and to do that, you have to have Go installed as well. I'm pretty sure. There might be a way to download Hugo where it already ships with Go, but if you're on Mac, you can use Homebrew. There's plenty of other ways to install it too, depending on your operating system. But I'm going to run this command right there, Hugo server, and that -- disable fast render. Once upon a time, I knew what that meant, but I don't right now. So we're going to run that. And it's going to build, and bam, it built the site. And that was the first build, so every subsequent builds end up being quite a bit faster. But you can get some information here. You can see I've got 133 pages. Like, that would be really annoying if I had to manage 133 HTML pages, but I don't. And most of those are blog posts and entries about the talks I've given. I add more to them over the years. And you see these paginator pages. We're going to talk about what those means, because Hugo's got really cool pagination built in. But let's go ahead and go to the site, localhost 1313, refresh there, and we've got it all up and running. It's literally the same site that is on the codeboss.dev. So let's kind of talk about how the theme is set up and where some of the cool Hugo stuff comes in. So the home page is largely not content management driven. It's pretty set in stone, and that's a pretty common thing when you're building sites, even for content management. You might control some of the content, but the theme is kind of set. So we've got my name here and everything. This is all JavaScript. This is 3.js back there. Has nothing to do with Hugo, but it was no problem at all integrating CSS, JavaScript with how Hugo works. I've got some information down here. Again, that's all. I forget if this is coming from a content management system. It might be, honestly. This is coming from it, this content right here. And I know when I go down here, all these items here are also coming from the content management, so which is pretty representative of how you might build a site, like tagging certain pieces of data. And that's really what I did here. These are projects that appear on my project site, but I tagged them as basically being featured, so they show up on my home page. So got a home page here, got an about page. This is probably the most standard page that we have, and it's content, it's title, it's a header image there, and you'll kind of see how that gets created. But it's rich text. We've got links and everything here, etc. Nothing too wacky there. These are 2 external links, so they have nothing to do with Hugo. But the navigation is built with Hugo. So, and you can do sub-navigation and everything, but that's all built with Hugo, which again is very representative of what you would do with a CMS. So let's go to, so content and projects are different pages. So content is going to be pretty similar to what a blog page would look like when you're using a content management system. The way those typically work are you've got a page that is just a placeholder for like your repeating content. In WordPress, the default is a post, like you're creating a blog post. Hugo doesn't have any assumptions of how your data is structured, which is nice. That's probably my biggest complaint with WordPress is it assumes every site has pages and has posts. And that's probably accurate for most sites. I mean, most sites do have pages, but not all sites have posts. They might have like job openings or news items, but not necessarily a blog post. So usually WordPress involves like installing WordPress and then hacking it to make it work like how you want to. And that's just, I've truthfully never built a site in WordPress that I felt like this is 100% clean and I'm doing it the right way. Whereas with Hugo, it was just, it's, you know, there are features. If I don't need the features, I don't use them. It was very lightweight. So let's kind of jump down here. Again, we've got a title. That's an actual page there. We've got the content here. This is just some rich text there. And then we have all this stuff right here. And these are dynamically generated based off of the tags that I've given my content. And that's, again, getting really into like how a content management system works. This is what's called a category up here. So typically, a piece of entry has like, you know, only one category. It's either a talk or not, or a blog in this case. And you can kind of tell that by like the little icon down there. If it's like a little speech bubble, that's how I've styled it as a talk. And then if it's not, most of the stuff I've done lately is talks, but I've got some blog posts that are more recent there. But these are all tags, and a post can have as many tags as I want to. So it's very common to have like a piece of content like show up here on this one. So now we're showing everything that's tagged as DevOps, and you can see the URL has changed because of that. But I'm also showing, you know, front end here, and there's very, very good chance that there's things that are going over tags. And Hugo really does this very nicely. One thing that I'm really was impressed with Hugo, let me go ahead and get back here. You see we have this pagination down here. We're pretty accustomed to that in web development, but think about how that works. Typically, if you're a developer, whenever you go to like the second page, for example, what you're doing is you are typically sending a request to a backend server that says, hey, give me the second page. You might say like, you know, the offset as well, like I want 25 per page, whatever that is. But you're sending those as like query parameters typically, and your backend is going to get in the database and query that data. Well, we're using a static site here, so you do have limitations with what you can do. Because this is all HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can't, there's no backend to query. There's no database. You can't just say like, give me page 3 and then dynamically query those. Like these pages are all generated behind, like as you know, as you're building your content, these pages are like actually like this like /page2/page/2. There's actually an HTML file that's called that is generated like this. And that's where the real power of, I think, you know, pagination can be a big limitation of a static site because you don't have those querying capabilities. Like you don't have a search, for example. Hugo doesn't ship with a search because you can't. There's no backend. If you needed a search for a static site, you'd probably use like one of Google's tools that can overlay search on your static site, and that's a total great option there. But usually static site tools don't do great with pagination either, but Hugo does, and that's really, really awesome. And you could paginate like based on tags and everything. So let's go to like how things work here. Like you know, this is paginated here. Again, think about this. Like think about like the cross section of things that have to get generated here with a static site tool. Like it's generating pages for like HTML files for each. It's generating 5 HTML pages for like each of the 5 pages here, but it has to generate, you know, 2 pages for strictly this content right here, and it has to generate this page. So it's awesome that Hugo does this all behind the scenes, and I don't have to worry about it. And I kind of want to show what that looks like. But this is the part that impressed me the most, was how Hugo handled tagging of data and pagination, and really that. Now let's kind of go through projects here. I mentioned that a lot of sites don't. That WordPress assumes you have blog posts, and that's kind of all it assumes. You can add more things, but it kind of still assumes they're all blog posty, right? Well, I have projects here. Like these are generated from like content. These aren't hard-coded here. Like all these images, the links to the images, all this stuff here, these project types, these tools used, that's coming from content that I'm generating. I'm not generating any of this via HTML. Like this is all just using the same page template, really, generally the same page template that About is using, and actually content too, at least like the same header stuff here. So it's very content driven here. And from here, and we can, same thing here, we're using pagination at the bottom of this. So it's just all built in and everything. So, and then same thing with like bottom navigation right here, that's using Hugo's navigation. So I've kind of done a lot of talk about how the site is laid out, and for the demo, I'm going to go through some of the code, but I also want this to be open-ended because I don't really have like X amount of things I for sure want to show. I kind of want to just go through some things. So if there's anything you've seen on the site that you're curious how Hugo does, then I really want to show that. The last thing I really want to show too is, I mentioned I'm hosting all this on Kubernetes. Let me go ahead and let's just see like the total amount of memory that we're using for that. So I'm going to use, so K is short for kubectl, which is the Kubernetes. It's the typical command you use. It's just an alias I have. But let's just say, let's look at all the pods there. I'm just going to specify it by the code boss. So I've got one pod that's running, and it's using one. I'm not sure if that's like a megabyte there. I'm not sure what the lowercase m exactly is, but
it's a millicore, so 1,000th of a CPU.
Okay, so thank you, Gabe. So this is a millicore, so 1,000th of a CPU. So very lightweight, and again, I'm not sure if this. Okay, it says bytes there. So 3 megabytes of memory there. So this is incredibly low. We can look at other things that my Kubernetes cluster is using, and top pod. This is my whole like single node cluster. So it's using a total of 24,000 megabytes. My site's only using 3 of those, so that's pretty cool. Let's look at just all of them that are running, and I must have locked in my one namespace there. So we're not going to go through any of these at all, but like you can see, these are in the hundreds and the tens. Meanwhile, like the code boss is there. Hey, there's simple slides too. 2 megabytes. It's so powerful. If you have a tool that can be hosted through static site, it's just so much easier to manage it. Again, no database. This is all on version control. Like the content is in the code base. It's wild how nice this is. So let's go ahead and go to the code. And when you generate a site with Hugo, you're going to get some of these things. I don't think I'm really using this archetypes. I did some digging, but I'm not as familiar with exactly what they mean, or at least my theme might be the thing using them as opposed to my content here. But if we go to the content, we can kind of start to see how there's no like routing file in Hugo. Like there's no way that you can just say like, oh, I want /projects to go here. It's all based on how your content is laid out here. So we can see we have about, entry, and projects here, and we have this like index MD. And this is how I tell Hugo that this is like the content for what's on my home page here. So if I wanted to go to like the home page here, and it's all Markdown. Hugo typically ships with Markdown. You may be able to change that, but Markdown also supports HTML just fine. So if we go here, so really you can kind of see this is the customization options that I've given myself for my home page. And you can see this like top level stuff right here. This is what's called front matter. It's something that Hugo uses. I think it's pretty common in a lot of different tools to have this front matter. It's kind of like your metadata for whatever content you have. So some of this is required by Hugo. The title, the date is like, it's not required, but that's the date that I've published. That's how it knows how to order things. This draft false is required because that's how it knows to publish something. And then otherwise down here, this is just the content. I can put this wherever I want to. It's up to my theme to determine that. So for me, I decided to put that just in this section right here. So let's go ahead and look at another page here. If we go to content here, let's see what that's looking like. So if we go into content, so I actually have this thing called entry right here. I'm not sure where the URL content comes from. Somehow I must have changed that, but entry is actually like actually no, I'm sorry, no, never mind, I forgot. Entry here is where we have like the actual content that is on my site. So this like accessibility for the web, I called that in here. If we go to like, front end here, we have accessibility for the web. That's this actual piece of content right here. So let's actually go check that out here. So this is a talk, and some of these are things that I've added. Like this video URL, I added that in my theme. That's how it knows to go ahead and generate this bit right here. We've got some of the things you've already seen, a title, a date, a categories. Hugo does allow you to have multiple categories, which is fine. I just built my site where it assumes you can only have one, but you can see the tags here. Again, draft false, and then this is just the actual content here. Now, this is typically what you do when you're managing a site with Hugo. You have you manage your own content. You're typically not managing your own theme. So I'm not going to go through the theme in depth because that's not super important, but I do want to show just like the pagination, how easy that can be here. And I did want to actually go ahead and show I've got this from WordPress to Hugo thing there. I was going to go ahead and add my talk here. But if I go through and let's find that particular item, one of the cool things that Hugo ships with is just hot reloading. So I'm going to search for, if I change this from draft to true, then it should automatically update there. I didn't have to refresh there. That required a full rebuild and then a hot reload. So just to show that one more time. And this is what happens as you're editing the content too. It'll just pick up everything there, so you don't have to refresh and everything. And it's been very awesome. Let me go ahead and just show. I'm just going to show how simple the pagination is there, and really from there, I could dive deep on anything that we want to, showing where certain pieces are found in the code, because it would kind of be fun for me to review where that is again. But I won't drive that. I kind of want to see if anybody has any particular questions. So for me, the theme with Hugo, you do have this themes area here, and I created one called the Code Boss. And I'm not going to dig too deep into how the themes are built. There are some standards of stuff. You kind of build these layouts, and then you have different ways of handling certain things. But for particularly in pagination here, let's just go ahead and see. So this entry list page right here. So I've got this is where we're getting more into the Go side of things. If you're using Hugo, you don't really have to care about Go, but Hugo itself is a templating tool, right? So if you're building a theme, you are caring about templates, and it's built on top of the Go templating engine. So we're using a partial here, and that's probably because I'm using it in multiple places, but let's go ahead and see where the entry list page is right here. So we've got HTML in here. You can see that. We've got the Hugo templates in here and everything. You can see some of this the Tailwind classes I've got here. And we've got another partial here. You can see I'm passing data to different partials. Again, this is just built into Hugo, and this is just kind of how I built my partials. But okay, so I have this. So this template right here, this internal pagination, that's an internal template to Hugo. I didn't have to write that. It just gets included. All I had to do was basically define how I wanted the pagination to work, and then it worked. I'm just saying I want 12 items per page. I could change that to be 18, and there I get 6 more rows there, or I'm sorry, another row of 6. I could change it, and you should be able to see the items down here changing. Let's go ahead and change this to 30. So yeah, you can see it's literally generating all those pages, regenerating them, so quickly on the fly, and each HTML page just generates that. So it was just such a joy to work with, and this is kind of where I would like to end it. There's tons more that I could talk about, and again, I probably would want to refresh myself on how everything is laid out, because I built this and probably stopped building it in about March or something. But I had updated just the other day for this content right here, and I updated with dependencies, and it's just very. I feel it's a lot more lightweight than what my site was before, and I really like it. So I guess I'll kind of go back to the slides here, and then we can jump back to anything demo questions. But that's it. That's me. I'm Aaron Krauss. I'm the Code Boss, and I don't have a slide for this, but I'll just kind of mention this tool it's not a one-size-fits-all tool. There's obviously many reasons why you wouldn't want to use a static site for your content. Again, users can't log into this and dynamically change data, which is a problem. That's a limiting factor. I mentioned there's no search built in. Again, that's just the nature of having everything a static site, so that's a problem. Again, there are ways around that. Google's got some solutions that you can overlay on your site, but it's just not built into the framework because it can't be. And I'm sure there's others too, but for what it is, very lightweight tool where, especially if you're the one managing the content, it is very nice. So all of that said, that is it. Does anyone have any questions or want to see any particular portion of the site that we didn't talk about?